Welcome to the show. My name is Charlton with Big C. This is Charlton and Big C Sports, coming to you worldwide on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C. And them good old boys down south, I want to say bienvenidos to all of our listeners in Latin America, also across the pond in London, England, as well as Paris, France. Of course, you good old boys in Canada. We love you in Africa, the Big C tribe. But there's no one we love more than the good old boys down south, in the land of the free, in the home of the brave, on a beautiful November the 18th, 2019, Grando Deportes. Big C, how's it going for you good old boys down south?
Charlton, it's all fantastic. We're living in a bevy of sports right now in America. We got football 7 days a week, so I really don't know what day of the week this is.
Yeah.
But I think the president got a little disgruntled with the NFL and sent them off to Mexico tonight.
Let's send them all off. I hope they can get back across that wall. They're in all good shape, so they can probably climb a wall. Big C is all fair and love and war. I want to say today's show is sponsored by your Northern California Cadillac dealers, home of the all-new Cadillac Escalade, the standard of the world. And when you go by and test drive yours, tell them Charlton and Big C sent you, as well as a fleet of Cadillac cars. You can follow Big C Sports, brought to you by Google and Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow him on Xfinity Comcast Television, launching soon on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and other smart TVs all over the universe. I want to just jump into what we're so grateful for, which is when people need help, it's nice to reach out and touch somebody's hand, or just pick up the phone and call and get some help. We have a national suicide hotline paying homage to our military veterans, but it's for everybody, Big C. 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. Big C, why is that so important to you?
Well, it's so important, Charlton, because we have this horrific disease in America that's called suicide, Charlton. And so many people, unfortunately, have gone that path, that they've taken their own lives. Many of our military veterans who have come back home from serving our great country, Charlton, have felt destitute and alone and depressed, with nowhere to turn to, no one to talk to, no one to understand what they've been going through, to not have that camaraderie they've had with their fellow veterans during that time of service, Charlton. They've almost like been turned out on the street like somebody released from an institution and not having places to go. And they felt many forms of desperation, Charlton. And unfortunately, many of them have ended in this horrific disease that's called suicide. About 20 veterans a day, Charlton, that succumb to this in this great country. And we have to find a way. We put so much effort into other remedies for other diseases, opioid abuse, Charlton, cancer research, which is all, prominent problems in America. But our veterans have always been a part of America, Charlton, keeping this nation sovereign, keeping us safe here at home. And when they return home, we have to find a way to keep them safe and sane.
Yep.
And that's something that the government as well as society needs to spend more time in doing. So the National Suicide Prevention Hotline number, Charlton, is a way to help hopefully stem that crisis that we're having in America. Not just for veterans, but every layman day person who is out there. But even more so for veterans, Charlton, because of the services that they provide for this great country.
Yep.
And they do it without asking, Charlton. When we think about our military academies who play sports, throughout the collegiate level, Charlton, these young men go out and play with great character and admiration in support of their country, knowing that their days as an athlete is over once their days at the military service are done, and they're going to go serve this country.
Yeah.
So our country needs to find a way to serve our veterans as well as our everyday people, Charlton, beyond this National Suicide Prevention Hotline number.
It's amazing that we give it out, 800-273-8255. That's 800-273-8255. Or you can text 838-255. That's 838-255. And just thinking about all the things that make people have conversation. We always celebrate Big C's Friday Night Lights, just telling a lot of the young kids to make good choices. It's not always easy to stand up to peer pressure, but sometimes a lot of kids do stupid things too because of peer pressure. This thing called vaping that's analogous to some of the veterans having issues. People are saying vaping is okay, but then doctors saying people are having, cancer from it and other issues too. So everybody just Google to get the information, but I love the fact that we tell people how to get help before we get into a sports show. I want to get your thoughts on this thing that we have with Colin Kaepernick. From one night, you want to find a way why Colin Kaepernick is so valuable to the NFL Big C. We just had this incident with the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Cleveland Browns about how to suspend players, what players get suspended, and what players don't get suspended, etc. And $250,000 in fines, or $230,000 in fines to each team. And Myles Garrett is all over the news for that Thursday night that it happened, and then Friday. And then Saturday comes along, and then the NFL with the Colin Kaepernick and JC, whatever it is that got it mixed up. No one's really talking about what happened with Myles Garrett in Cleveland. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the fiasco with Colin Kaepernick and the NFL on Saturday, Charlton, was a fiasco from the beginning. There was never any sincerity on the NFL's behalf in far as Colin Kaepernick is concerned. You're going to say that it's going to take over 2 years to invite a player to a workout, and then at the last moment, you're going to put regulations on it, Charlton, that may not have been accommodating to both sides.
Yeah.
But why would it take 2 years to form a workout for an individual player? And not only that, if you look at the Saturday schedule in the NFL, that means that all teams have traveled or arrived at their destination. And I don't believe that Atlanta had a home. Matter of fact, they were in Carolina.
Yeah.
So they were in Carolina. Even the personnel from Atlanta had already left the city.
Yeah.
So when teams, and college football is being played on Saturday, so where are the majority of scouts and team personnel? They're at college games scouting players that they plan on having for their future, Charlton.
Yep.
So if the NFL had really planned on having a legitimate workout for Colin Kaepernick and doing it properly, Charlton, you would have done it on a Tuesday. Mostly when most NFL teams have that day off, Charlton, as a day of rest for their everyday players.
Yeah.
So as I look at how this thing was put together, and it was put together at the last moment by the NFL. The NFL does nothing last moment under haste, Charlton.
No.
So was the sincerity really there, or was the NFL trying to put him on spectacle to make it look like he was the one that was backing out? Because neither one of the sides have trust for the other. They just came out of a lawsuit at the beginning of the year where they had a settlement, Charlton.
Yeah.
So there's no good blood between Colin Kaepernick and the NFL. The NFL had made a stance 2 years ago that Colin Kaepernick was not going to play in the league anymore.
Yeah.
And they solidified that stance this weekend, Charlton.
Well, when I look at that, everybody has to read. And something you always talk about, Googling it and reading. And we don't know the contract. We do hear about certain things that were in the contract, but unless you read it with your own eyes, no one really knows. And sometimes people say, we will give you what you want on this condition. And that condition hasn't been publicized, but it has been talked about. No matter what happens with that, situation with Colin and the NFL, I still think that they are about money. And at some point in time, they're going to let money rule out whether he gets a job or not. That the needles move. I mean, every network covered a guy that he's been ostracized for 3 years. It took off the needle Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph, what happened in Cleveland. Have you ever seen people say, well, he's not significant, he's not talented, but then it gets off the needle, Big C. The number one issue that was even headlining major news outlets with Myles Garrett and Mason Rudolph. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, the issue with Colin Kaepernick is everybody's rebuttal is that he hasn't made the statement that he wants to play in the NFL. I think he's made that statement over and over.
Yeah.
That he was ready, he was capable, he was wanting to play in the NFL. This is the reason why he has pursued that. The issue with the fight in Cleveland last week, Charlton, that becomes a separate NFL issue like many other. I mean, it's no different than a drug suspension that goes on in the NFL. We just happen to see that they still played another weekend of football, whether those players were going to be on the field or not. The NFL goes on, just like it has gone on from Colin Kaepernick. You haven't seen one of the 32-member teams of the NFL start a game without a quarterback in the last couple of years since Colin Kaepernick has taken a snap, Charlton. You will see those two teams that had players suspended and fined take a snap this upcoming weekend. The NFL goes on. The NFL is a huge entity. It's not one player. We fall in love with individuals that we see play because of greatness or just spectacular play that they've presented to the fans and the public. But it comes down at the end of the day, Charlton. You look at how many teams in the NFL have losing records.
A lot.
There's abundance of them. Those teams still go out and play on game day. It's not the end-all to be-all because you have a losing record in the NFL. They're still going to make their money as owners.
Yeah, they will. I want to just get your thoughts because we don't know the conclusion of this. I think if there's anything that it did show is that he's still marketable. Where can you find anywhere in this country where a person gets fired from their job or not allowed to even pursue employment, and it takes over the news stations all over the country? Every single one of them, people have their opinion. And ironically, I would love to see everybody who wants to compete for anything is freedom of liberty and justice for everybody. I would love to see that happen, whether he gets work or not. I think that's just a shame that he doesn't. But and I want to get your thought. I want to take two sides of the angles. People say, well, they had it set up for him. Yes, set up. Notice those words for him to show up in their Fox House, Big C, our chicken coop. And he's decided when he saw the setup and the writing in the contract, he said, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then a lot of dumb guys said, well, he was given a chance and he didn't go into that Fox den where they invited him. But that just says they're not going to hire him anyway. My own opinion is they'll never hire him because at one point, if that happens, then they'll have to admit that they were wrong. And a lot of men just cannot admit they're wrong, even if it helps them win games. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, I made that statement a couple of years ago that Colin Kaepernick would not play another down in the NFL because the NFL was too big for itself. You know, he's not the first player that the NFL has banished for life.
Yeah.
People tend to forget that. He just happened to play the quarterback position, Dalton, but this has been a long-standing issue with the NFL. When they want to get rid of a player, that player is gone, whether he's a star or not. And there's been many of them over the decades that have quietly disappeared. The thing about the NFL now, Charlton, is it has so much notoriety on these 24-hour networks, whether it's broadcast, television, or radio, or even print. You hear the NFL 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. This is why that story continues to resonate. But there's been players throughout the history of the league that have been banished from the league, and people have forgotten about them because you don't have a 24-hour sports news cycle. That's the difference in today's era versus what it was a few decades ago.
Well, I just think how we talked so much, especially we were doing this thing in the month of October about black history and black accomplishments, and it still goes back, I guess you could say, to the days of Jim Crow and Reconstruction, when black Americans are looking for work, people try to find the slightest thing to say, well, he did this wrong, or he didn't do that right, and we still have that happening today. But that's why we say it's all fair in love and war. Everybody has their own opinion. Before we run down...
Well, Charlton, when you do things against the stances of a league, the league has remedies for that. And it's not just in football. Look at Donald Sterling in the NBA when he owned the L.A. Clippers. When he made statements that the league felt that was anti-league, Charlton, and all of a sudden they forced him to abandon his ownership of an organization because of his rhetoric. That's the same thing Colin Kaepernick did, was rhetoric. And you also look at the owner of the Richardson, who was the owner of the Carolina Panthers. Because of rhetoric and actions that he did, the NFL made him abandon his ownership of the team. He had to sell it. So it's not just the players. They do this to owners also. I mean, we see a player on the field. We don't see an owner up in the box, being involved in the game personally. But these are the actions that professional leagues take. You have to understand, these are groups of billionaires. This is the reason why they have an individual who owns a team, not a group, not a corporation. These are individuals who make individual decisions. So when it comes to a vote, it's one vote, one team. And this is what's done throughout the league. They put commissioners in place to be the spokespersons for the owners, so the owners don't have to go out there and individually make statements. So that commissioner's always going to be the fall guy, whether it's baseball, football, basketball. Pete Rose, banned for life, one of the greatest hitters in Major League history with the most hits all time. Banned from a sport, Charlton, for not something he did as a player, but something he did as a manager. But the rest of the business partners, which are the teams and the commissioners, said, hey, he's going to be banned for life, and that's what was done, Charlton. So these are how things are done in the corporate world. Just so happen to be in sports, it just happens to resonate on mainstream television.
Yeah. Let me get your feelings on this talk about Jay-Z, obviously, and being a part of helping with the NFL. For what reason, I don't know, because a lot of times, if you don't read the fine print in the contract, every contract is written with an in and with an out. You just got to have a lawyer look at it. Every contract's that way. So, do you see, and again, if it's clandestine and unspoken, why even have him in there? When people say that, well, Jay-Z was a reason for what, Big C? Nothing. The fiasco? What's Jay-Z's role, and why is it so clandestine and secretive, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, Jay-Z has a role as a corporate business partner, Charlton. I mean, Jay-Z is being pointed out by people, but what was the role of the 49ers family? What was the role of any other ownership entity in the NFL in that? You have to understand the commissioner operates at the hand of the ownership.
Yeah.
Jay-Z is put out there to deflect from the ownership of the NFL.
Right.
The owners had more of a say-so in this than Jay-Z did.
Yeah, and if they get tired of Jay-Z, in that contract is written an in and an out clause. And if he bucks the trend, then he'll be out too, and he knows that. So you won't hear much about him at all. But it's all fair and love and war. I do wish people the best. Before we get into some NFL and college football, I want to congratulate our friends in old Canada, our home and native land. The CFL, you have the Hamilton Tiger Cats. They will take on the Winnipeg Blue Bombers in the 107th Grey Cup matchup next Sunday. They'll play it in Calgary, Big C. Now, this is a league that's been around. They've had this 107 championships. Imagine 107 Super Bowls. I wonder if Canada have ever exiled one of their favorite players because he decided not to stand for a flag. No, it was never about that. But has that ever happened in Canada? I wonder, Big C, your thoughts.
Well, it's a little too far up north in the snow for me to understand what's all going on up there, Charlton.
Yeah.
But, I mean, this is a unique situation. I mean, the NBA has banned players. Major League Baseball has banned players. The NHL hockey has banned players. Like I said, because the NFL is in a 24 news sports cycle now, 24 hours a day, they make the story bigger than what it actually is. The NFL is not going to stop playing football if Colin Kaepernick doesn't take another snap. They haven't missed a game or a down since he has not played in NFL. And then you got to look at this aspect, Charlton. When the NFL started its season this year, there were over 1,000 players that lost their job of employment that they had during training camp. So the NFL snapped off, took that original snap at the original time that they had set for the start of the season. When the Super Bowl takes its snap for its kickoff come February, they're not going to be sitting back thinking about what players are no longer in the league.
No, they're not. Not at all. And so we know it's just politics, Big C. Like Scarface told us in the movie, it's politics. And politics means there's an in and an out clause in every contract. So congratulations to Canada, Hamilton, also Winnipeg, in reaching the 107th Grey Cup Championship. That will be played in Calgary, which is a beautiful city. They've already played twice this year. Hamilton has 2 games in the lead, and they've averaged 30.6 points a game against Winnipeg. Winnipeg's averaged 28.2 points allowed. Winnipeg's given up 22.7, and Hamilton 19.1. Turnover ratio +8 for Hamilton, +7 for Winnipeg. And then quarterback sacks, Hamilton's gotten 54, Winnipeg's gotten 48. Every stat says that Hamilton will win their 3rd game against Winnipeg this year. But until you play it on the field, Big C, it's not always the case. Your thoughts?
Well, that's what it comes down to, is what you put on the field. Everybody's looking at analytics nowadays, but all sporting events come down to player production on the field, Charlton. Who wants it the most? And when it's the final game of the year, Charlton, you sell out for everything.
You sell out for everything. So I want to get into Big C's thoughts for NFL football. Obviously, Thursday we had Cleveland 21, Pittsburgh 7, and the big, I guess you can call it a fight or whatever it was. It made news for about a day or two. And then Sunday, we get into Baltimore and Houston. It was the biggest game of the NFL weekend, and it turned out to be that Houston had a problem, Big C. Not only was Lamar Jackson just amazing, it's scary that this is his 17th game completed, and he looks to be, when he gets in the zone, that he can be unstoppable with his legs or with his feet. And Jackson, it just showed that time and time again. Then Watson just had a hitch in his giddy up the whole game, Big C. Your thoughts?
Was it the biggest NFL game of the season, or was it the biggest analytical hype game of the season? That's how you have to go into it, Charlton. Every game in the NFL is a big game when you're in playoff contention.
Yeah.
And you have to look at it from that perspective. And when you look at this game, Charlton, this game goes full cycle. You know, everybody's saying who is the best young quarterback in the NFL. All right?
Yep.
Lamar Jackson beat Russell Wilson. Patrick Mahomes beat Lamar Jackson.
Yeah.
As you look at Deshaun Watson, he beat Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
So as you look at that, this thing has gone full circle.
Yeah.
About who has beaten who. So really, who is the best young quarterback in the NFL? None of them have 2 victories over anybody, Jonathan. They've all beaten each other.
Yeah.
And that's what great athleticism comes down to. I mean, everybody sings the praise of Lamar Jackson, which he's played outstanding football ever since he's been a quarterback in the NFL. But you got to look on the flip side. How many points did Houston score in this game, Jonathan? That's what it comes down to. People right now are overlooking the Baltimore defense.
Yeah.
I'm not, discounting the accolades of Lamar Jackson, but somebody's got to take a look at this Baltimore defense. And they got to give a lot of praise to former GM Ozzie Newsome.
Yeah.
The last draft that he made, Jonathan, Lamar Jackson was the corner post of that draft at quarterback, but also the players that he surrounded Lamar Jackson with on the offensive line at tight end and also at linebacker, Jonathan, has made a difference in this ball club. Ozzie Newsome was a genius.
Yeah.
That defense right now resonates of the defense when they had Ray Lewis and Ed Reed running the joint, Charlton, in Baltimore.
Yeah.
So Lamar Jackson, I take my hats off to him for his performance thus far in his pro career, but I also take my hats off twice to that defense in Baltimore.
You know, when you think about that, when they had New England come in town, and then New England could have really gotten blown out in that game, and people still look about how great Jackson is. It was a 37-20 win, the Ravens over the Patriots. And I know the Patriots, they had a couple of turnovers by the special teams unit of the Baltimore Ravens that allowed New England to have a short field position twice. So you could say they really held New England to 1 touchdown and a field goal. But that's amazing that you brought up a great point. Offense is sexy. I know you're a defensive guy. And defense is saying, well, we gave up 7 points. Why all this talk about Lamar? It's a team concept. But imagine a team that can take on high-scoring Houston and then a high-scoring New England, and without special teams miscues, they've only scored about a touchdown each. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you can say special team miscues. But if you look at Baltimore's record, Charlton, and being realistic about the Baltimore Ravens, they have a couple losses on their schedule. And those teams that they lost to are not the best teams in the NFL.
Yeah.
You know, everybody's talking about the Cleveland
Browns.
Yeah. And the struggles that they've had this year. Well, that was one of the losses that Baltimore suffered.
Yeah.
Was to the Cleveland Browns.
In Kansas City.
And they got blown out by the Cleveland Browns, 40-26. So I think Lamar Jackson was on the field that day when they lost to the Cleveland Browns. And we've seen the struggles that Cleveland Browns has had even against mediocre teams.
Yeah.
They lost to Kansas City when Patrick Mahomes was healthy.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I praise Lamar Jackson as well as I praise all the young African-American quarterbacks in the NFL for the tremendous job that they've done. They changed the landscape of the sport.
Yeah.
But we also got to look at the detractors in these situations also. He's lost twice. Everybody's claiming them to be the best team in the NFL right now.
Right.
But were they the best team in the NFL when they lost to Cleveland? Were they the best team in the NFL when they lost to Kansas City? And they lost to those teams starting on back-to-back weeks.
Back-to-back weeks. Well, let's compare another game that happened yesterday. Indianapolis 33, Jacksonville 13. And that's a game, obviously, Indianapolis is up and down depending on, how the quarterback play works for them. But Jacksonville's kind of fallen off. They kind of adjusted to who we thought they would be at the beginning of the season. Indianapolis, that was a good win for them, especially with Houston losing. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this is the Indianapolis coach. This shows you the value of Jacoby Brissett in Indianapolis. He was banged up, missed 2 games, Charlton, and they lost both of those games. Now he's back in the lineup, made a huge difference. He and running back Marlon Mack, although they lost Mack yesterday to a broken hand.
Yeah.
But that combination is a killer for the Indianapolis coach. They have a guy who can sling the ball down the field. They have a running back that can control the ball on the ground and control the clock. The defense has been outstanding all year. They have one of the youngest defenses in the NFL.
Yep.
They're very powerful, and they most likely have the best offensive line in the NFL.
Yeah, I was really impressed with that score yesterday. Atlanta's found some new moonshine. I know they found it, Big C, with a 29-3 win over the Carolina Panthers. And we're talking about how Carolina was right on the goal line with Green Bay up at Lambeau Field just the week before. Did McCaffrey get in or did he not? Well, the official said no. A lot of Panthers thought they got in. But were they still living in that game because they went to sleep against Atlanta? Or what's up with Atlanta? Why are they flying so high lately, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, they might want to keep Cam Newton's phone number on speed dial, Charlton, because, it seems like reality has come back for Kyle Allen in the NFL. The backup quarterback is always the fan favorite until he has to get out there and perform for an entire season. We've seen that Kyle Allen may have hit his benchmark, Charlton, because now everybody has consistent game film on him, so they know of his weaknesses and his strength.
Yeah.
The Atlanta Falcons a couple of weeks ago after they had a bye, Charlton, Dan Quinn changed up some things with the coaching.
Yeah.
He changed coordinators in every position on the team, Charlton, deregulated guys from where they were and assigned them to do coordinator positions.
Yep.
All of a sudden the team has responded to this, Charlton, and they've won 2 lights-out games. You think about what their defense has done. They had like 6 sacks when they went into the New Orleans game, Charlton. They have doubled their season total in sacks in the last 2 games. They've gotten after quarterbacks with an vengeance.
Yep.
They've always been able to score, but now they're playing great defense.
That's amazing when you think about it that way, Big C. The backup guy always looks good when the starter is having an injury problem. It's like the guy who leaves his wife for the girl he met online. She's already got 20 other guys. It's not as pretty once you get on the other side of the fence, Big C. New Orleans 34, Tampa Bay 17 in a game that could have gone either way, but New Orleans, they fell against Atlanta too, and then they come back against Tampa. I thought Jameis would have a better game, but New Orleans is New Orleans. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this game was all about Jameis Winston, Charlton. You throw 4 picks, you're going to lose a game in the NFL. It's proven week in, week out. If a quarterback throws 4 interceptions, his team is going to lose. And Jameis Winston went into this game through 4 interceptions, made it easy for New Orleans.
Yeah, made it easy for New Orleans, Big Z. And they called it the Big Easy. I think that's what they call New Orleans, the Big Easy, Big Z. So he made it easy for them, no pun intended. And now, when you look at the Dallas Cowboys, Prescott over 400 yards passing. Normally, when a quarterback has over 400 yards, they lose because they're trying to come from behind. If they still don't have a running game in Dallas, there's a lot falling on the shoulders of Prescott. And if this, obviously he's going to get paid, but like a lot of black men, they say, well, we'll pay you later. You don't need your money now. But he's shown that, I'm not saying that Zeke Elliott's a liability, but you and I have pointed out, and you don't have to agree with me, but in the game against Minnesota, I thought that Elliott played a little bit concussed, Big C. That's why he didn't play that well against the Vikings. It's the same running back showed up in Detroit. He just doesn't have, something's not right with him. He's not explosive. He's not decisive. But Prescott, that crazy hip warm-up that he does, he's actually helping them win, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, when you look at Elliott, Charlton, there's always going to be critics of anybody. He scored 2 touchdowns. What was the difference point spread in the game?
Yeah.
Ezekiel Elliott had a critical hand in that. Yes, Dak Prescott had 444 yards passing and 3 touchdowns.
Yeah.
But who did he do it against? He did it against Detroit, Charlton. And they did not blow out Detroit in this game. This was a 1-score game against the Detroit Lions, a team with only 3 wins on the season.
Yeah.
So really, how good are the Dallas Cowboys when you come and think of that, Charlton? They're not dominating anybody. That defense in Dallas is the problem. It's not Ezekiel Elliott. It's not Zach Prescott. Yeah. It is the defense in Dallas. They're not getting after anybody, and they're not stopping anybody. Jeff Driscoll, a backup quarterback, a late-round draft pick, stepped in for Matthew Stafford.
Yeah.
Probably played better than Matthew Stafford the last 2 weeks. The last 2 games that the Lions have lost have been a 1-score game.
Yep, it makes a big difference. Defense always shows up at that. Dallas got to fix that problem, Big C. And then a game, before we get into the Big C timeout, a game that Denver just does not know how to win a game. They were up, I think, 20-0 against the Minnesota Vikings on the road, and then the Vikings come back and get a 27-23 win. And it's like the Broncos don't want to win. They had about 28 seconds on the clock when they were down right around the 10-yard line, I believe. And they let the clock run all the way down to, I think, 11 to 13 seconds. And they threw 2 passes, and they were all incomplete. They could have had at least 4 downs to take that lead. Had they spiked the ball with about 28 seconds left. They were on the 10-yard line, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, there had been 99 times in the NFL that teams were down by 20 points at halftime and never came back and won the game during the regular season. Yeah, in the 100th attempt, the Minnesota Vikings did that. They came back and beat the Denver Broncos. This Denver Broncos, but I take my hats off to the young rookie quarterback Allen there in Denver.
Yeah,
he's played phenomenal football. Kirk Cousins played lights out in the second half.
Yeah,
he did what the Minnesota Vikings are paying him to do.
Yeah,
the Broncos had an opportunity to win on the last play of the game. Allen put too much heat on the ball, and the receiver could not come up with it. But the Minnesota Vikings still are not beating teams with winning records. The Broncos have a losing record.
Yeah, they do have a losing record. So we know it's all fair in Lemon War. I love the game, and it's just a matter of watching more NFL football, especially as we get to the break coming up for the playoffs. I mean, it's just a push that gets really serious after Thanksgiving. We're going to take the Big C timeout. We'll be back in just a moment. All right, we are back from the Big C timeout, also known as the Big C pause, and you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcasts. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. You can follow Big C Sports on what I love, these two apps called Google or Alexa. Just say Google or Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can also follow Big C Sports on Xfinity Comcast Television, launching on Roku TV, Apple TV, Fire TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe, getting back into the world of the NFL. So you're saying with Kirk Cousins, you like that? You like that? Is that what you're saying, Big C? Your thoughts?
Well, he's doing right now. I mean, he's hitting a deep ball. He's been able to throw his receivers open. There was a lot of controversy, and the receivers were complaining early in the season.
Yeah.
Those complaints got some live action from their quarterback, and he's been a much better player as of late.
New York Jets are starting to fly a little bit higher. Okay, they beat Washington by the score of 34-17. And I know Haskins had, he's at the you can put him in the second week mark because he wasn't able to start throughout the season. They put him in there some backup duty, but I think just give that man 16, 17 games like you do everybody else, Big C. That's going into next year, and you'll start to see a better him. But the Jets, not a big story. They did win a game, though, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they won. They won back-to-back games, and that's what you got to look at the Jets. Their offense has come alive the last couple of weeks, Charlton. They were able to put 34 points on the Giants the previous week, and now they come down the road to Washington and beat up on the Skins. They're on a hot streak.
Yeah.
Adam Gates must feel comfortable now as the head coach.
He has job security now, Big C. Another thought, the Buffalo Bills 37-20 over Miami. That's a divisional game, the AFC East. Thought Miami would have played a little bit better, but Buffalo could probably beat a Dolphin on land, but in the water, I give the Dolphin the edge, Big C. Your thoughts? They were on land this time.
Well, the Dolphins got up early in this game. Charlton couldn't hold on to the lead. It kept Buffalo in playoff contention.
Yeah, they kept up in contention. And then a game on the West Coast. I keep telling you about the prop bet and the point spread, and everybody has their own opinion about it. But the Niners were favored by double digits in this game. And then it's a 36-26 win. They were down also to Arizona. I thought Murray played a great game. And the 49ers and some officiating that gave them some first downs, and they really didn't get first downs. A lot of home cooking, and I want the Niners to do well, but I just call what I see. You can Google if I'm wrong or not. But whatever happened to that good old boy on that fiasco of a play at the end, the lateral where you try to get 7 guys to lateral the ball like Cal and Stanford did back in the day, and a guy from Arizona flips the ball out. It was like the Holy Roller Part 2 with the Raiders and the Chargers. And the Niners were kicking the fumbling the ball to the end zone, and they let it stand, and they covered the point spread. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this was a game that the Niners had to come from behind to win the game, Charlton. They could not afford to lose 2 consecutive games and keep their momentum going. They did what they needed to do to win, to stay on top of the NFC West, Charlton, and they handled an interdivision rival.
Yeah, well, they did it in Vegas with a little bit of help from Vegas. I mean, you could have just grabbed... When you're down by contact, it's called down by contact. How's a guy for Arizona land on the grass, guys fighting for the football, throws it out, and it rolls up into the end zone about 20 yards later, And that's not the Holy Roller Part 2, which is illegal. It's all fair and level war, Big C. And the Oakland Raiders 17-10 over Cincinnati. They made it tough, but they kept Cincinnati wondering where Marvin Lewis is. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, you got to look at the Oakland Raiders, Charlton. They're just, they're praying that the Kansas City Chiefs lose tonight, because if the Kansas City Chiefs lose tonight, the Oakland Raiders are actually in first place in the AFC West. Derek Carr pulled out himself last night, Charlton, and rushed for a touchdown. First time he did it since 2015 to propel the Raiders to a victory.
Yeah, and I was impressed by the crowd noise in Oakland. They know their team's leaving, but they're still getting the most out of it they can. Big C, but the crowd noise is impressive. Another game of the day, they built it up that way. Carson Wentz has arrived, and he's going to put Tom Brady in his place. Well, Nick Foles looks pretty good, because Nick Foles did on the road where Carson Wentz couldn't do at home, which was beat Bill Belichick and the Tom Brady staff, Big C. 17-10, New England over Philly. I thought New England would win the game, but I didn't think they could hold Philly to 10 points, the great Bill Belichick. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, this was a hard-fought defensive battle all the way through. You got to look at Philly's defense also. They held Tom Brady without a touchdown, and this is the third game this year that Tom Brady has not thrown a touchdown pass. But you got to take your hats off to that New England defense. Yep. This is the one who rises up and has New England at 9-1 on the season, Charlton. They held the Phillies to just that one touchdown, but also Carson Wentz has been a bit of a liability in some of the Eagles' loss. I remember the opening game of the season that they lost to Atlanta, where he was high on a couple passes to Aguilar in the end zone, and it cost the Eagles a chance to win that game, as well as he was in this game against the Patriots on Sunday. He was high to Aguilar late in the game. People wanted to point a finger at Aguilar and say, well, he's got to make that catch in that frigid weather, and the ball's on his fingertips, and he's trying to maintain himself in the end zone. You got to put it on the quarterback also. He's got to be a little more pinpoint when you're making $111 million guaranteed.
You think? Yeah. Well, when you're making $100 million, you got Jared Goff against Trubisky down at the L.A. Coliseum. And I know it's an old arena, but it sure is a great-looking place when it's full. And they filled it up last night. L.A. always has a late-arriving crowd. They even filled it up with the Lakers in town. But give me your thoughts on this defensive battle that we had. Gurley fumbled the very first time he touched the football, but he played better after that. And then Chicago has a hard time kicking field goals. It's not just because it was because the windy in Chicago. It's because their field goal kickers, just a lot of bad luck with Chicago and their field kickers. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, when you look at the Rams, Charlton, they were without two of their top receivers in the game last night, Cooks and Woods. They were not there. So when you think about Jared Goff and what he has to work with, Charlton, he's working with limited tools, just like Mitch Trubisky is working with limited ability as far as he is as a quarterback. He left the game late. They said an alleged hip injury, but I think, that Matt Nagy has just had enough of what Mitch Trubisky cannot do as a quarterback with the Chicago Bears. I'm not sure if he'll play again the rest of the year, because if you say a hip injury, you can put him on IR and not playing. But the Rams also have to look at their struggles offensively. Only 17 points against the Bears. And if you remember last year at this time when they played the Kansas City Chiefs, they hung up over 50 points on the scoreboard.
Isn't that amazing? Give me your thoughts, though. The Rams at times, defensively, they always look like they're still a playoff team. It's the offense that's been much ballyhooed, much hyped, but on the field, they're the liability, and they gave their quarterback, $120-something million offensively. I know they got to do the offensive line, but they could have given some of that money to the offensive linemen, because the defense is still playing good football. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, Charlton, when you're without your top two receivers in Woods and Cooks, that hurts you on the deep ball. It's hard to stretch the defense. You got young receivers. Cooper Kupp's a great receiver, Charlton, but he has had a problem getting deep because he doesn't have a support cast. Todd Gurley has not been the Todd Gurley of last year, even though he had 130 yards of total offense last night. But this team has struggled all along, and they may not even make the playoffs this year.
Oh, yeah, they're not getting in. You're only going to have the Niners and the Seahawks playing, and that's a battle for the NFC West, the Seahawks. If things play out the way they should, the Seahawks will get the 49ers up in Seattle, and we know that's an incredible place to play a football game and try to get a win up there. I want to just say congratulations to everybody in the world of football. It started with Myles Garrett and then Mason Rudolph and that fiasco. Never want to see that again. But just as egregious, in my opinion, is this thing that's going on with Colin Kaepernick. Whether he gets a job or not, as you mentioned, many other leagues and many other players have had the same thing. But transparency is always important. You got to read the contract. There's always an in and an out. I want to get into the world of college football and what may be, we talk about players getting paid and should they get paid. The answer is, of course, they should. Because I look at what happened with Tua in the game against Mississippi over the weekend, Big C, I think Mississippi State. And that injury, he had the surgery obviously today. He's going to be okay. But after you have so many injuries, Big C, and you got to get high acclaim for your run pass option. Bo Jackson, when he had that hip injury he was playing for the Raiders against Cincinnati down to the Coliseum in the playoffs back in the day, never came back the same. I don't think Tua's in the same situation, but I want to get your feeling. Does it hurt his draft status, Big C? Your thoughts?
Realistically, I don't think it hurt his draft status. If you go back a couple of years ago, the Dallas Cowboys drafted a linebacker in the second round who had tore up his knee in the college football playoffs out of Notre Dame,
yeah.
Jalen Smith, who is now one of the best linebackers in the NFL. The Dallas Cowboys took him in the second round. So we've drafted you to give you a year of red shirt basically in the NFL. We're just going to get you healthy because we know what you are as an athlete and you're dedicated to your craft. Tua has a history of injuries. Unfortunately, the young man got hurt. I mean, it hurt me when he got hurt because you looked at the bright future that he possessed in the NFL. And what got me even more so, Charlton, is all the people who want to jump on Nick Saban, saying, it was Nick's fault because they were up 35.
No, it's not
Go back and look into his career and see how many times they were up 35, 45 points, and he's still in the game playing.
Yeah.
This man had ankle surgery last year. He had ankle surgery this year. He's like a racehorse. You can't tell a horse he can't run unless you put him down. That's the only way he's not going to run.
Yeah.
But I put this injury more on Tua than I do on Nick Saban. Because Tua had the opportunity to throw the ball away. He threw the ball away in the end and got hurt.
Yeah.
He could have just thrown the ball away and ended the play. He tried to extend the play. This is what athletes do. They try to extend plays. And Tua brought this injury on himself as much as anything else. You don't want to see an athlete get hurt.
No.
But he had the option to get rid of the ball. He chose not to. He chose to extend the play. Regardless of what he does recovery-wise coming out of this, he's not going to be broke. Alabama has an insurance policy on him, Charlton, to protect him somewhere between $10 and $20 million that they have an insurance policy on him for his health because he was that valuable. They knew what his status would be in the NFL draft.
Yeah.
But you have to go back and just look at athletes. We have athletes get injured all the time.
All the time.
People want to compare him to Bo Jackson. Well, Bo Jackson tried to continue running on his.
Yeah.
That's what damages Bo to the extent that it was. Also, Bo was a running back, a very heavy man. And so his cutting ability is different than what a quarterback has to do on a play-by-play basis. You expect a quarterback to drop back more than you do expect for him to run. He was not a Lamar Jackson-type runner, Charlton. He was mobile, but he wasn't that runner of a quarterback. He was a pure drop-back passer who happens from time to time to run the football.
Yeah, so we know you got to play the game, and you're going to get hurt sometimes, but every player is one play away, one hit away from being injured. I don't blame Nick Saban at all. If you ask that young man again, he wasn't forced to play football. He chose to play football, and people know what happens when you play it. I want to just go down some of the top games that happened. You look at LSU with a nice win over the weekend, and, I mean, obviously they beat Mississippi 58-37. A lot of points given up by the defense, but they were 4 out ahead at that time. Still looking like the number one team, at least offensively. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, they went out and handled business, and that's what you'd have to do as LSU. They put up points. They had a convincing win. Yes, Mississippi did score some points. That's a conference team, Charlton. In the last 2 weeks, LSU's defense has given up 80 points. But at the end of the day, Charlton, they're still undefeated.
Yeah, undefeated. And then you have Ohio State. LSU's 10-0. Ohio State's 10-0. Ohio State with a nice win over Rutgers. Everybody beats Rutgers 56-21. Up next is number 9 Penn State, that was knocked out, earlier by Minnesota last week. Then Minnesota falls to Iowa. Sometimes kids are just too emotional and they can't come down and get focused again. But Ohio State, this is their big game. They talk about Michigan, but there is no Michigan significance if the Buckeyes are not focused against number 9 Penn State. I don't think Penn State will get close to them, but it's a game that you got to play to win the game. You can't go looking ahead. Big C, your thoughts?
Ohio State plays one game at a time, Charlton. Ryan Day has this team focused. The players on this Ohio State team are outstanding. They've been in this position before. They're not going to let this game get past them.
No, they won't let it get past them, and I just appreciate how well they play. And then Clemson playing with a little bit of attitude, 52-3 over Wake Forest. Wake Forest came in there with 2 losses, the best opposition in the ACC, but Clemson made it look like they were playing Foreman, Big C, 52-3. Your thoughts?
Well, Trevor Lawrence hasn't thrown an interception in the last 4 games. He seemed to have found his stride, 4 touchdowns, and Travis Etienne is consistently averaging over 8 yards a carry on the ground.
Yeah, they're looking pretty good. No matter, you can put them down in the number 5 spot, or you can keep them at the number 1 spot. All they do is keep winning. Another big game that happened in the SEC was Georgia, with a close win over Auburn. It was 21-14. Auburn was down 21-7 and came back and had a chance to come and tie the game late in the 4th quarter. But then Georgia prevailed, and to do that on the road, I thought that was said. Big statement. How did Georgia ever lose at home to South Carolina is a question, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, that on any given Saturday, anybody can lose, but you got to look at Auburn. The Auburn is looking on the verge of having 4 to 5 losses when this season is over. So that victory that they had early on in the year against Oregon, and that loss for Oregon doesn't look that boasting well with the number of losses that Auburn is compiling.
That's very well said. And then, again, with Alabama, 38-7 over Mississippi State. There are people saying that it's knocked them out of bowl consideration. The way I see it, LSU is going to win the SEC. If they win the SEC, I think it's going to bump Georgia out. That would be Alabama's chance to get in, assuming that Alabama beats Auburn. But if Auburn could knock off Alabama, long story short, if Oregon wins the Pac-12 and LSU knocks out Georgia, if Ohio State wins out and Clemson wins out, there's room for the Pac-12 champion to get in, just because you have a large media market on the West Coast, bigger than what you have down in Alabama watching the Tide come in. Just my opinion, Tua is sexy for Alabama, and sometimes there's voter fatigue, where there are times you might want to get some good old boys saying, let's get some new, donuts in the shop. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, if you look at it on slate, if Oregon wins out, Charlton, that means they have won 12 consecutive games to make the college football playoffs. But that one loss, Charlton, will come to a team that has lost at least 4 games.
Yeah.
Alabama beats Auburn. That means that Alabama has beaten a team that beat Oregon. And if they beat them with a backup quarterback, Charlton, and Oregon had their starting quarterback, and if they beat him convincingly, how does that boast well for Oregon? Because that's what the rules makers will look at, Charlton, the committee. They'll say, okay, Alabama beat Auburn by 21 points. Oregon lost to them by a touchdown.
Well,
and Alabama did it with a backup quarterback. And they both had the same win-loss record. The media market in Oregon and Alabama probably are about the same size, Charlton, but the influence that Alabama has on the national scale dwarfs what Oregon has. And Alabama travels well. So wherever Alabama goes, they're going to bring 40,000 fans with them. Oregon can't guarantee that they'll do that.
Well, I think the fact that Oregon's been in before, and for my West Coast brethren, what loss, and I asked all the media, what loss was the worst loss? If you're Oregon and you lose on the road at a neutral site the first game of the season by a touchdown in the last 9 seconds of the game, is that a worse loss than Georgia losing at home to South Carolina that's not even ranked in the top 40 or even top 50 for that matter? So if we're going who had the best loss, I think that would be Oregon, Big C, even over Georgia. That's just my opinion, but anyone can Google that.
If Georgia loses, Alabama's in 5th place. Georgia's in 4th place. Alabama, like I said, if they beat Auburn by 21 points, which is the worst loss? Oregon losing by a touchdown and losing to a 4 to 5 loss team, or Alabama drubbing that same team that beat Oregon?
I think that's an argument that we'll hear coming up down the road, especially if Auburn knocks off Alabama. I want to get your thoughts on Oregon. They are, 9-1. They beat Arizona 34-6. They have another game coming up on the road against Arizona State. And then I want to finish out the top 10 because I got Oklahoma. I want to get your thoughts as well as Utah and then Penn State. You're feeling on Oregon. And for the West Coast thought, Big C, if Oregon wins out, they'll obviously have to beat a number 8 Utah. And then if just to get in, if LSU beats Georgia in the SEC championship, if Georgia wins, then they're probably bringing LSU somehow anyway. But if you have Alabama and Oregon, and then if Oregon beats a ranked Utah, maybe number 7 at the time, and Alabama beats an Auburn team that's fallen down to number 16, just numbers-wise, that does look strong for a Pac-12 consideration, in my opinion. Your thoughts?
Well, you got Oregon and Utah most likely will play in the Pac-12 championship team game. One of those teams will lose that. But as I said, you got Auburn. When you look at Auburn at the end of the season, they will have 4 losses. They lose to Alabama, like I said, they could end up with 5 losses on the season, Charlton. And Oregon lost to this team, where Alabama, if they beat them, they would drop this team. That's what you got to look at. People look at head-to-head matchup a lot.
Yeah.
Yes, all these teams will have 1 losses, but what was the quality of that loss, Charlton? I mean, LSU beat Alabama in the best game of the year on the Power 5 conferences.
Yeah.
And so that would weigh well for Alabama. If LSU goes undefeated, the only team that Alabama would have lost to is the best team in the country.
So let me get your thoughts down in Sooner territory, the Oklahoma Sooners. Again, I bet if Oklahoma got in, they'd have to win the Big 12. Oregon would have to lose to a Utah. Alabama would have to lose to Auburn. And Georgia has to get knocked off by LSU. And all of those things are probable, Big C. Any way that Oklahoma, which is 9-1, they went on the road. They were way behind Baylor. But they found their mojo. They came back at Baylor and won a 38-31 thriller. They still have some breathing room down at Oklahoma, Big C. Your thoughts?
Well, they watched the Patriots and the Falcons Super Bowl game, Charlton, and came back from that 28-3 deficit that they were in at halftime, Charlton.
Yeah.
But I don't think Oklahoma has a chance to leapfrog all those teams to get in. Yes, because Oklahoma had 2 games, Charlton, where they barely squeaked by opponents throughout the season. So that's what the bowl committee will look at. I mean, they got drubbed by Kansas. Kansas State. Kansas State is a 3 or 4 loss team,
Yep.
Charlton.
Yep.
After they beat Oklahoma, they didn't vote well against other teams. So, like I said, it comes down to strength of schedule. And it's always nice to see controversy when it comes down to the bowl playoff selection committee, Charlton.
Yeah.
But it comes down to what does a team do overall. And when you look at the opponent that you lose to, yes, you talked about Georgia losing home to South Carolina. They missed a last-second field goal that would have won the game. The bowl committee will look at that. You also got to look at how Georgia has dominated their other opponents.
Yeah.
They look at that also. So all the factors, even though Oregon would be a team with 12 consecutive victories, they would have still lost to a 4-loss team, neutral site apart, all the playoff games on neutral site.
But I still want to take the shine off of that. Georgia lost to South Carolina. South Carolina lost at home to Appalachian State, which is nowhere near the same competition. So Utah, I don't think Utah can aim for the Final Four. I think their best hope is win the Pac-12 and go to the Rose Bowl. And they had a win over UCLA. They brought the Bruins back down to earth by the score of 49-3. Big C, your thoughts?
Yeah, but see, just like you said, if they win out and they beat Oregon, they're not going to get in because they lost to USC, a 4-loss team also.
Yeah, that's another point there. Penn State, no hope at all. And Happy Valley, the biggest hope for them is maybe a chance to go down to the Sugar Bowl. Or if they got a Rose Bowl bid, I think the Rose Bowl would rather bring in another team with 1 loss because Penn State has mighty Ohio State coming up next. If they can knock off Ohio State, they may get leapfrog up there around number 4 or 5. Big C, your thoughts?
Well, that's a tall task. And I mean, none of these things would be set in stone because all these teams still have conference playoff games, Charlton, for the conference championship. You can win the division of your conference. I mean, we're still 3 weeks away from having conference championships, which is going to decide it all in the end.
Yeah, it all fair and love and war. Number 10, Florida 9-2, beat Missouri 23-6. Still no opportunities for them. But I do feel bad a little bit for number 11, Minnesota. They're 9-1, and they play Northwestern next. So they'll get a chance to feel better about themselves. But they had everything going for them. They had that big win over Penn State at home. And like a lot of young men, they can't stay focused. They went into Iowa. They're a better team on paper than Iowa, but number 22 Iowa with a 23-19 win to knock off the hopes of even having consideration for the Final Four. Your thoughts?
Well, Minnesota went into this game with a case of the dropsies. They dropped everything that hit them in the hand, Charlton.
Yeah.
And so they let themselves down in this game. It wasn't that Iowa outplayed them. They just played down to a lower level.
Yeah, they sure did. And speaking of playing at a higher level, you can follow Big C Sports 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, worldwide on the #1 podcast network in the universe, iHeartRadio Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Apple Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Google Podcast. You can follow Big C Sports on Spreaker.com. You can follow Big C Sports on my two favorite apps called Google and Alexa. Just say Google. Our Alexa, play Big C Sports Podcast. You'll hear from our sponsors. You'll hear welcome to the show. I will introduce Big C as the Mystic, and he'll do his thing. And I really appreciate the way things are going with Big C Sports. You can follow Big C Sports on Xfinity, Comcast Television, also launching on Roku TV, Fire TV, Amazon TV, and a lot of smart TVs all over the universe. Big C, I want to just close out today talking some NBA basketball. NBA action is fantastic. And just looking at some of the games, that kind of sparked your attention in the NBA. You look at the game that happened in Sacramento, California. Boston Celtics come in. They hadn't lost since week 1, Big C, the first game. And the Kings got them 100-99. There was a ball, almost a layup short shot that just kind of rolled around and off the rim to win the games for the Kings. But that's a team that's been winning or playing close. They lost to the Lakers by 1 point. When they didn't have De'Aaron Fox, they passed the ball around more. When they have De'Aaron Fox, he's a great talent, but he tries to penetrate a lot and keep the ball maybe too much. If you ever heard of a good thing when a star player gets injured so guys learn to play team ball more, your thoughts?
Well, it happened a couple of years ago in Washington when John Wall went down, how the Wizards went on a win streak to help propel them to the outside of the 8th spot in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But you also got to look at Boston also. They lost their leading scorer, Gordon Hayward, right before this road swing starts, so they got to really, reorganize their lineup.
Yeah, they got to do that. And then you also, just some games that I really impressed with Philadelphia with the win over Cleveland. We expect that. Denver with a 131-114 win over Memphis. Orlando over Washington. And so a lot is fair in basketball. Really love talking about the big games that matter. I want to close out tonight's thoughts with the game down in Mexico for the NFL. Now, the NFL started the preseason. They were up in Canada. I think they were played in Edmonton where the Raiders played the Green Bay Packers. They've been across the pond a couple of times in England, Big C. And now they're going to Mexico. And it's big for the Raiders. It's bigger for Kansas City because if you go down to Mexico and you lose, they got the Raiders again, but it's going to be in Kansas City. I still think Kansas City's in the driver's seat. But your Eagles going to take a fall. And San Diego's going to have, not San Diego, but the Chargers will have home field advantage, if that makes any difference at all. Give me your thoughts on how big this game is for Kansas City, your thoughts.
This game is huge for the Oakland Raiders, even more so from Kansas City. Kansas City has struggled defensively. They've already lost 4 games on the season, and that's where the Oakland Raiders are at 4 games. If the Kansas City Chiefs drop this game tonight, Charlton, they will be a half a game behind the Oakland Raiders. Not only that, the L.A. Chargers will be a half a game behind the Kansas City Chiefs, so it will be a bottleneck in the AFC West. Patrick Mahomes put some points on the scoreboard last week for the Chiefs down in Tennessee.
Yeah.
But the defense once again fell flat and didn't realize they needed to stop somebody.
Yeah.
They're facing a better passing attack against the Chargers tonight than what they faced against the Titans last week. So that's been the Achilles heel for the Kansas City Chiefs. Patrick Mahomes in his second game back from his dislocated knee.
Yep.
How many points can he put up against this Charger defense? We know they have a tremendous pass rush. Melvin Gordon is getting stronger week by week. And so he's going to have to score at least 35 tonight just to beat the Chargers.
Yeah, it should be a good game. We have some NHL standings in the Eastern Conference Atlantic Division. Boston is in first place, followed by Montreal. In the Metropolitan Division, Washington is ahead of the New York Islanders. In the Western Conference Central Division, St. Louis is atop of the pack ahead of Colorado. In the Pacific Division, you have Edmonton of Canada, and they're ahead of Arizona in the Pacific Division. So we look forward to seeing more NHL happening. We know Colin Kaepernick getting, whatever that's going to be is going to be. NFL will always go on, and we know it's just a matter of college football deciding who's going to be in that Final Four. We'll always look forward to it. Big C, back in the day, there was a man by the name of Drew Boudini Brown. He was known as Muhammad Ali's right-hand man, and he would always tell Ali, with all you got to use, how can you lose? Rumble, young man, rumble. Big C, what are you looking forward to in the sports universe?
Well, I'm looking forward to a smoother week in sports than what we had last weekend, Charlton. We started out with the fiasco with Colin Kaepernick over the weekend. We saw Tua get hurt at Alabama, which is, putting a shadow over a great potential NFL future, Charlton.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for an exciting game back in Azteca, Mexico tonight, Charlton. And hopefully, if the president doesn't get in the way, the players can get back into the country.
They can always climb the wall. A lot of players got to climb the wall. And you can climb the wall, too, every Monday through Friday at 5 and 6 p.m. worldwide when you follow Big C Sports on the Big C Sports Network, on the #1 network in the United States of America. And Big C Sports has been voted the #1 sports show in the universe, according to Big C and them good old boys down south. As we always tell you, there's never, ever an excuse for domestic violence. If you know any man or woman going through that garbage, please pick up the phone and call 911, because no man or woman should ever have to go through that garbage on their own. And as we always tell you on every Big C Sports show, we thank you, we appreciate you, and we hope that you have a super fantastic day.